Today we're jumping right in with the Procreate time-lapse of the lines for today's pieces. It's been a minute since I filmed myself doing art, and I was having a really hard time coming up with ideas for what to do. I didn't want to go off a prompt list because I just spent the past couple months trying to wean myself off of prompt lists, so one thing I've been wanting to do for a while is to start up a series focused on cryptids and creatures from myths and folklore, so that's ultimately what I went with. Today's art is going to feature two more obscure cryptids, the snake-headed dog and the cactus cat. I'll have the articles I used to draw them / tell you about them linked down below if you're interested. First off, since I do plan on turning this into a series, if y'all have any suggestions for monsters, whether they be cryptids or creatures from mythology or whatnot, do let me know in the comments. I'd especially love to tackle lesser known creatures. So I have actually never heard of either of today's creatures until I decided to focus my creature search on cryptids of California, just as a random dart throw, if you will. That produced a lot of weird ones, and I settled on these two because they just seemed like the most fun at the time. I was really looking forward to pulling out the Shin-Hand watercolors my husband got me for Christmas to do an actual piece on actual watercolor paper with them. I used these almost exclusively, although I did pull out my Prima palette in the second piece for some of its pre-mixed blues and pinks. I am super rusty when it comes to watercolors since I've barely done anything with them while I've been out on a bit of a hiatus. That being said, I wanted to keep things pretty simple with these pieces and try not to go crazy with the background or anything, although that is something I would like to do in the near future. I feel like I've never done a big piece that I spend several hours or even days on this channel, and honestly, I just get bored, y'all. But one day I'll do a piece that I really apply myself to. I just need to find the right subject matter. Anyways, yeah, let's talk about the snake-headed dog. According to the entry on Cryptid Wiki, the first and only time the snake-headed dog was sighted was on May 24th, 1996 in Magalia, California. It was described as being 4 to 5 feet in length with a sleek, serpentine head, red reptilian eyes, a slender 24 to 30 inch neck, shaggy black fur, long hind limbs, shorter forelimbs, and no tail at all. This creature supposedly ran out in front of a mom who was driving her son to school, causing her to drive off the road and into a canyon. Don't worry, they survived. The person behind them also claimed to have seen the creature, and as far as I can tell, the snake-headed dog was never seen again after that. Honestly, I think this creature could have been any number of hoofed animals, such as a off-color deer or a loose alpaca or llama, as their silhouettes would seem very similar to the description, but who knows. This creature was pretty simple in its description, especially as far as coloration went, but I still haven't quite figured out how to paint black fur, so that did give me quite a bit of trouble. I did several layers of black, but I still feel like it's not dark enough. I also thought the color scheme was a little too boring for me, so to my great regret, I decided to add in some coloration reminiscent of a ringneck snake. I really wish I had gone with a less saturated color for this, but there wasn't any going back after I put that color down. I liked this a little more after I took a break from the image, but boy was I cursing myself when I first did this. Near the end, I pulled out my colored pencils to strengthen the lines and also to add some shading. The shading helped the creature look more like it belonged with the background and made the red-orange less of an eyesore, at least in my opinion. I also added some very quick dashes of red-orange into the background just to make the colors even more cohesive. So, there's the snake-headed dog. Now that I've had a chance to play with my Shin-Hand watercolors outside of a sketchbook that does not agree with watercolors, I can say that I really like them. The colors are so vibrant, and even though it's been a while and my memory might be unclear, I think they are far less chalky than the cheaper watercolors I've used in the past. I reactivated some of the colors I had mixed in my Shin-Hand palette months ago, and while they were a little grainy, they definitely didn't form these huge, gritty chunks that my other watercolors tended to do. They seem to lay down on the paper better as well. I don't know if it's my imagination, but it felt like they sat better where I laid them down. This might just be because I didn't have to work them very hard to get the colors I wanted like I do with my cheaper watercolors, but I don't know. It just seemed somehow like I had better control of these paints. I thought that was just dependent on the quality of the paper and how much water you use, but apparently not. Anyhow, yeah, I'm loving these paints, and I think this is definitely going to be my go-to palette from now on, unless I'm feeling lazy and want to use one of the premixed colors from my cheaper set. As a side note, for some reason I totally forgot that I could shade with watercolor, and I kind of wish that I had done that with this piece instead of colored pencil. It probably would have blended the creature better with the background, but I think I went into panic mode after adding the red and just wanted to go into damage control with the pencils. As much as I'm griping about this piece, you'd think I'd hate it, but I actually quite like the end result, especially given how long it's been since I've used watercolors. I have to remember to give myself a break, as this was more of a warm-up / remembering how to watercolor type exercise, and it did its job because I was able to learn from my mistakes in this piece and apply that knowledge to the next one. Alright, before we get into the description of the cactus cat, I just wanted to point out that this background portion is going to be out of focus because I did a big dumb and forgot to focus my work area after moving my phone. My bad. I decided to leave the majority of the background in here anyways, just so y'all can get some impression of the process for it. It just felt like too much of a shame to edit it out completely, so yeah, sorry if this quality makes your eyes bleed. Since I had warmed up with the previous piece, I felt more comfortable adding a little more detail into the background for this one. Although it's still pretty simple, I enjoyed working on this background and getting more of a feel for what I can do if I were to attempt a bigger, more detailed piece. You might also notice I had marked out where I wanted to put some bigger cacti in the background. I could play it off and act like I decided not to in the end, but the truth is that I started working on the cat while I was waiting for the background to dry enough to paint the cacti, and well, I forgot about them. Honestly, I'm okay with that, as I feel big green cacti might have distracted too much from the big green cat that's supposed to be the main focal point. The ghosting from the cacti is still there even in the final piece, but we're just gonna ignore that and call it an artistic choice. So, what is a cactus cat? It's up in the air whether or not the cactus cat was a cryptid that people actually claim to see, or if it's more of a folktale that people just made up to pass the time. But those two things tend to overlap pretty heavily. Either way, the description of the cactus cat is as follows. The cat-like body is covered with thorny hair, which grows particularly long, sharp, and rigid on the ears and tail. The latter branched in cactus fashion, these branches having scattered thorny hairs similar to those growing on the ears. The distal portion of the foreleg radial bones are formed into two sharp, knife-like blades, which the cat skillfully employs in making deep, slanting slashes at the bases of the giant cacti. Apparently, this kitty enjoyed drinking the fermented juice from the cacti it cut open, and after drinking its fill, would stagger around drunkenly, much to the amusement of passers-by. This critter supposedly heavily resembles a bobcat, so that's where I drew most of my inspiration from for its overall appearance. The article I came across also mentions that this critter had a, quote, unique and haunting wail, and also used the spines on its forelegs to make additional noises. This creature doesn't seem to have been too dangerous, though there is mention of it occasionally attacking people in one instance where it supposedly killed someone by clubbing them to death with its tail. The articles I found on it treat it less like a cryptid and more like a speculative evolution type entry, if that makes sense, which I thought was interesting. Overall, this was a fun, whimsical little critter to draw and paint, and it reminded me a lot of the kind of critters you'd find in Final Fantasy games. So my usual technique for watercolor pieces is to use watercolor as more of a base for colored pencil. I had every intention of doing that with this piece as well, but I was nearing the end and I found that I didn't think it really needed it. Particularly after adding the shading, I felt like the watercolor was enough to tie this piece together, aside from little spots of gel pen I used to add some shine to the eyes and spines. I was actually pretty surprised by this because I'm so used to needing additional media to round out my watercolor pieces, but in this instance I felt like adding colored pencil might have overworked the piece and I didn't want to mess it up when I was already so happy with it. After the mistakes I made in the first piece, this one was a much needed confidence booster and I love how it turned out, ghost cacti and all. The footage doesn't really do it justice. I wish I could show y'all how nice the colors are in real life, but alas, this will have to do. And that's all I had for you all today. It was so nice getting into the groove of filming and making art for y'all again, and yeah, I think this is going to be a fun little series to pepper in along with other subject matter and art related videos. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye guys!